Let's start this extraordinary story. I mean, they kind of seem to find Prince Andrew these stories. This is a story that the Duke of York appointed an alleged Chinese spy as his business advisor and promised him links to the heart of the royal family in an apparent serious breach of national security. Now, it must be very clear here that there is no suggestion at all that Prince Andrew knew he was a spy or was involved in any spying duties. But it doesn't look great. I mean, in a sense, it's probably quite normal that you would probably, you would welcome in people who've got a bit of money or a bit of influence. That's what you would do if you're a member of the royal family.
A business advisor, didn't he?
But it does question his own sort of judgment and perhaps his own level of security.
And also the people around him who are meant to be advising him. I mean, he was a trade envoy, so he probably met loads of people all over the place. And I think it's fair to say that under David Cameron and George Osborne, there was a bit of a charm offensive going on with China at the time. That's sort of flipped around now. But, I mean, look, he's going to meet people. Maybe he should have asked questions, but I sort of hope that there's other people that are more informed who'd be checking out who the Prince is meeting, what sort of correspondence they're entering into and all of that. So, yeah, I mean, Prince Andrew, he's like a sort of human flypaper for things being attracted to him that is not great look for him.
Not great.
There's this big new spy drama, Black Doves, on the telly at the moment.
I've watched it.
I watched the first episode last night. That's our box set for Christmas. And then, so there's lots of articles about spies under deep cover. And you remember there were these kind of Russian families that were under deep cover in America. Some of them were exposed. And one of them, I was reading the paper today, might have ended up marrying a senator. So it does seem, I think Caroline's right, that when you've got, it's fairly obvious who spies are going to target, senior members of the royal family or senior politicians. And therefore, if a member of the royal family is forging business links, which they're entitled to do if they're kind of a minor royal, but with somebody from a country which has a tradition, perhaps, of spying on countries like ours, then you would expect the security services to do the work. Not necessarily Prince Andrew's private secretary may not have the skill set. You'd want MI6 to know.
Well, I wonder if this would be maybe the Duke of York's defence, in a sense, because this seems to have emerged February last year, doesn't it? This, I think we only know him as H6 now, which already feels quite Tinker Tailor Soldier
This sounds
Spy.
like a mini-series in the making, doesn't it?
Doesn't it just? Yeah, I know. Black Pigeon or something maybe is coming to our screen soon. But, in February, he was taken off a plane and then subsequently banned from the country. He then appealed against this, which seems strange, really. And all of this detail, including the letters with the Duke of York, came out of the appeal case and was revealed yesterday in court. Now, you have to think to yourself, why would he appeal? Because it looked like there was no chance of winning? Or is this some double plot that actually very successfly, by appealing, he's dragged the royal family into something that was which we didn't know about before this?
And because we're saying now, where was MI6, where are MI5, all of this, it's a sort of bit of a power play to show how weak some of our defences are in relation to this. I think it's quite... That's, again, it sounds like a mini-series in the making.
And we've got a comment from Buckingham Palace, which I think, when you first read it, go, fair enough, but you think about it, go, it's extraordinary, really. Buckingham Palace have just simply said they do not act for the Duke of York, who is a non-working member of the royal family, and they declined to comment. Well, you may not act, but he's still a member of the royal family. And actually, as you sort of suggested there, his argument now could be, this is what happens when you take away the protection around me. I become vulnerable, and I've
got to make a living.
I've got to make a living.
I've got to engage
people will
with all
still
sorts
get in
of
touch
people.
with me, and actually, some of the documents suggest that the spy was told, he is quite desperate at the moment, so you might have a good chance.
I'm still a very big brand, and
Andrew makes a very strong argument to go, well, actually, he probably needs more security protection and the things that the royal family normally have around them.
It is fascinating that this guy can potentially appeal. Well, he is appealing, so maybe it is a double bluff, a triple bluff, but it is a kind of... Maybe it's a testament to our legal system that somebody you accuse of being a spy, and normally this stuff happens behind closed doors, can actually go to an appeal. It can all be public. These documents are disclosed. But as I say, I think, the security services should be protecting prominent people from undue influence. And if people are obviously going to approach them either straightforwardly because they are dodgy business people or because they are spies. And the security services should be able to tip off prominent people, say there's a reason this chap is getting in touch with you, and you should not have anything to do with them.
Now, at the moment, it feels like everybody you talk to is either just recovering from something, feels like they're going down with something, feeling unwell, or has got some kind of tickle. Charlotte was coughing before. I think she's fine. Dr. Amir is here with us this morning, sounding pretty croaky himself, although apparently that's the Lorraine Christmas party.
Yeah, I'm a bit croaky. It was a late night. I was at the Lorraine Christmas party yesterday.
Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. Are you coming to the GMB Christmas?
I am, yeah.
No.
I like to do Christmas properly. As you said, it's very exclusive, isn't it? So sorry, Ed.
He gets invited. Look at Lord Basie.
We are not amused.
I can
What is not amused?
By this humiliation on national television.
Exactly. We're just like...
You know, it's one thing for it to happen behind closed doors, to be quiet.
We don't make the rules, do we?
Please don't storm us.
Shall we move on?
The security services have decided you're not appropriate for the Good Morning Christmas
Yeah, they're tighter than MI6.
But to have it on
Christmas
national
lunches.
television...
So we've heard talk of this quademic, haven't we, for a while? And now figures show that we're up to more than the usual capacity on beds. How worried should we be? I mean, hospital cases have been up some 70% this week. Are you overwhelmed, you know, at the coalface in your GP surgery?
Yeah, we're seeing a rise in demand for GP appointments on an already kind of background of huge demand already. And I think winter is always bad for the NHS, but this winter is particularly bad. We've got these 4 big winter viruses that are putting extra pressure on these beds. COVID-19, flu, norovirus and RSV. And all of them have the potential to make people, particularly vulnerable people, unwell. And I think, yes, there's things that people can do themselves, such as ventilate indoor spaces, wear masks, get vaccines, and wash their hands with soap and water, depending on which virus we're talking about. But there is a wider picture here as well. You know, we know that these viruses put that pressure on, but there's still a chronic workforce shortage within the NHS. That puts that extra pressure. The RCN have put out a statement saying that there's a big nurse shortage right across the NHS. Community services could be better as well. I think primary care, if the funding was there, we could move more things into the community so there's less pressure on hospitals so they can get on and make those waiting lists shorter for people. Social care is a big problem. There's a big lot of patients that are medically fit for discharge but have nowhere to go because there's nowhere to put them in social care. So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at on a wider scale to ease these pressures in the NHS.
And I mean, for people at home, I always think sometimes you can feel ill and you go, God, is it a cold? Or is it a flu? You know, the symptoms can be quite similar.
Yeah.
What are people looking out for to that point where you go, actually, this is pretty serious, I should probably contact a doctor or a medical professional?
I think if it's really affecting your day-to-day life, so a cold, you should be able to manage normal day-to-day stuff. It's irritating, your nose runs, you might have a fever, things can settle with paracetamol that way. But with more serious infections, or if you've got complications of COVID-19 or RSV, then you have difficulty breathing, shortness of breath, kind of that all-over body pain, and you feel very, very
I always say a
unwell.
flu is when you feel like you just can't get out of bed.
You can't get out of
and
bed.
And you just want to stay in bed. That's when you know you've got the flu, I think.
Yeah. And most of this can be managed at home for otherwise well people, but it's children under 5, older adults over 65, those with underlying health conditions. Those are the people
And how bad
at
does the
risk.
flu need to get until you need to really be sick, go to a hospital then? What happens at that point?
It will vary from person to person and age to age.
Yeah.
So for children, it's about whether they're feeding, whether you can bring their temperature down, all of those kind of things, and what their breathing is like. For older adults, it's how much they can do for themselves in that day. Because if they're unable to get out of bed and make food or go to the loo and that kind of thing, they might need some extra help.
What about vaccines? Because you're always very encouraging, and the RSV vaccine has been in schools and for younger people and over 75, I believe
70, 79, I think.
79, is it? Right. But there's also talk that perhaps it's not that effective. Does that undermine the vaccine's position, and are you concerned about
so
that?
that refers to the flu vaccine being 30% less effective than previously thought. So
Really?
yes,
is that this year particularly with
this
the new
year
strain?
in particular. But the advice is still to get the vaccines because they will offer some protection against serious illness. And so, you know, if you are eligible, the advice is still very much
And just to explain
get
that,
those
because when I saw that this morning, I thought, God, how does that happen? Because what's interesting is every year the flu vaccine changes because of the flu bug, and we get the intelligence and the science from Australia, the Southern Hemisphere, because they're ahead of us, and they sometimes they get it slightly wrong, and they've got the figures slightly wrong because the people who ended up in hospital didn't match up with what they thought the protection was going to be.
Right. Right? Yeah. So we kind of predict which flu viruses are going to be the ones that hit us hard, and it is a prediction, and there is an element of error.
I worry about that, you know, because I think there's so many people since COVID have got this, you know, vaccine hesitancy. We know there's conspiracy theories.
Yes, there is a
people
lot of
have
that.
genuine concerns, and yes, because they've heard of people that that have got issues because of the vaccine, apparently. So that's a real concern, isn't it? If, you know, figures like this don't really help.
It's a huge concern, and it's a concern right across the vaccine system. So we're seeing a dropping number of childhood vaccine uptake as well, and those vaccines are really important in preventing serious illnesses that have killed children in the past and can still do so today. So we need parents to bring their children in for their vaccines, because I've seen a drop in parents bringing in their children.
I had my
for
flu
routine
vaccine 2 weeks ago. No brainer for me. I just think you just go and get it done. It can only help.
That is the advice from the NHS. Go and get your vaccines.
Amir, thank you so much.
Yes. See you at the party.
Yeah, all right, mate. I bet he's at the Chase Christmas dinner as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
You at the Chase Christmas dinner?
I'm actually at the
loose women.
You've got loose women.
I bet he will be.
I bet
you all love him.
No, to be fair, after the GMB Christmas lunch, I'm going to the Lorraine staff Christmas party this evening. So
what's the Lorraine party like? What? There's a division.
Let's move on. We are boring the nation with our Christmas.
We don't want to get into a fight. Let's talk real war. Of course,
we don't want to turn this into a Buckingham Palace punch.
Look, head of NATO, Mark Rutte, has told members to move to a wartime mindset. And speaking about the fact that the threat is coming at us and we need to go forward. And very often when you hear these conversations, it's always disturbing, isn't it? But it's talking about threats over time. But he's talking relatively soon. We're talking 5 years. And with all the debates we've been having over defence cuts and potential increases and how much more should be given, some people think. Does this feel worrying, or is this just the nature of NATO strategy?
I think it's a bit of a reality check that, you know, some of us will remember when it was like the peace dividend we were going to get from the end of the Cold War. Yeah. Fantastic. You know, we can all retrench back from how much we have to spend on defence. And the thing about, I remember a general saying about the Cold War, it was like conducting an orchestra, and post-Cold War, it's been like jazz. You don't know where the conflicts are going to come from. It's, you know, what is going to happen. And we all know in the last, 15 years, there have been lots of conflicts around the world in which we have been involved. There's been this 2% target for some time. I think only Italy and Spain actually still haven't reached it as part of being a member of NATO. And I think he's sort of saying, look, we really need to think about this. We've seen what's happened with Russia and Ukraine. There are other conflicts we might be involved in as well. And I don't think obviously, Trump has made a big deal about this. He made a big deal about it when he was last president of the United States. But I think what the Secretary-General of NATO is saying, it's not really just about responding to Trump. It's about us doing our best. I think we're aiming for 2.5% at the moment. I think we're
yes, and then there are others like Ben Wallace who think it should be up to 3%. Because last week, Ed, Al Khan's, the Veterans Minister, was saying that actually, extraordinarily, the entire army would be killed or wounded in 6 months to a year of fighting.
Yes.
I mean, that makes, when we've seen conflicts, hideous conflicts going on around the world and experienced as a country conflicts, that is not a place that people feel comfortable being, is it?
No, I mean, but he's basing it on the experience of Ukraine and how many people have been killed and injured in that war. And he himself is a very decorated Royal Marine. He's a very distinguished soldier. So he knows what he's talking about, although Downing Street, I don't think, was very happy with him speaking the truth in that way. But I think that Mark Rutte, the Secretary-General of NATO's comments are very welcome and very important. Part of it is politics, because he's signalling to President-elect Trump, who has said that NATO countries in Europe should increase their defence spending and not rely on the US. And that is not Trumpian excess. Jack Kennedy said that in the 1960s. The Americans have always accused Europe of freeloading. The Poles are now spending 5% of their budget on defence because they know what the Russians are like. They know that if Russia gets a deal in Ukraine, it's simply going to regroup. They know that Russia effectively wants to recreate the Soviet empire, and we have to rearm, and we have to work very closely as well. A message to all the ridiculous Brexiteers, we have to work very closely with our European colleagues. We've always been one of the foremost European countries when it comes to defence, if not the strongest, alongside France. And we need to cooperate in terms of the equipment we procure, training together, because we have to, I never thought I'd say again in my lifetime after the end of the Cold War, be ready to defend the European landmass.
Exactly. And I think part of the discussion will be, as well as just the percentage, is what are you going to spend it on? And that will be a big debate.
Yeah.
I mean, we know in this country, and I'm sure it's the same elsewhere, that some of the procurement in defence, has loads of money's been wasted. I mean, not so long ago, we know that, you know, John Healey, you know, the Secretary of State for Defence, has basically said we're going to, you know, rule out spending any more money on some of the procurement that's happened because some of it was agreed years ago. I mean, not in 2 years, I'm talking about 8 years ago, and has yet to deploy. So it's about what you spend it on as well is going to be important too.
Well, you mentioned Trump.
You mentioned Donald Trump, and, you know, maybe it's a positive thing, and maybe he's going to have a positive impact on the world, because Time magazine have named him the 2024 Time Person of the Year.
It's a kind of amazing brand, isn't it, when you think how media has changed and how many people probably still read Time magazine, that whoever a kind of random magazine decides is the Person of the Year becomes a talking point. But, I mean, you've got to say fair play to them, because if you just look at it objectively, the resurrection of Donald Trump from losing the election in 2020 and being accused and indeed convicted of countless offences to winning outright the presidential election.
I mean, they've quoted it as marking his comeback of historic proportion, and there's no doubting. But actually, I think, and, you know, I think like a lot of people have been thinking, God, you know, this is a major moment. And you start looking at everything very differently now since Trump is in power. He has changed the world and changed the way politics works.
Yes.
I mean, and I think he's shown someone like Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer's still coming out with 5-point plans, 6-point plans, milestones. It's so out of touch.
Yeah.
I think it's. I mean, I think it's important with this sort of accolade of, you know, the Times Person of the Year. It's, and they say in the, sort of promoting it. It's not about saying this person is the best thing since sliced bread. It's you know, it's whether you love them or hate them. They're actually the most influential person around at the moment.
Yeah.
And undoubtedly, he last got it in 2016. Apparently in 2015 he was a bit miffed that they didn't give it to him then, but they gave it in 2016. Not getting invited to the Christmas party,
I bet they haven't asked Donald Trump to the Good Morning Britain.
Do you know what? Yeah, going there with Dr. Amir. But, you know, it is... he is influential, and already on trade. I mean, this week he was announcing that for corporations in America, that they're going to reduce their tax to 15% if they make goods in America. But it cuts through.
Yeah, well, that's the point. I mean, you know, no one's saying that, you know, what Starmer is doing is not probably right, and that's sensible. It's sensible politics, but it's what cuts through to people.
And you're
who are
so
going
right. I mean, look at
vote.
Farage. Whether you agree with Farage's politics or not, he talks to ordinary people,
I agree with that too.
It's so frustrating.
Can we just quickly talk about Gaza, because I think it's important. One thing in his Times interview, Trump said that he's made phone calls to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and asked him to wind down the war in Gaza by the time of his inauguration. And overnight, we've heard, the Wall Street Journal are reporting that we may see, and this is going to be huge if it happens, a hostage deal where Hamas have agreed for the first time that they will allow the IDF to temporarily place themselves in Gaza in return for 30 hostages. Now, that is great news for the hostages and their families. The question is Trump having an influence? And no matter what we think of Trump, that is a good thing.
I mean, his policy is, I want peace. I don't want to get into the detail of it. I just want to bring an end. And that, again, as you said, cuts through, and it looks like it might work.
And it's about using your leverage. He's been very clear, not just around the situation with Israel and Gaza, but also Ukraine, that I think he said things like, I'm going to stop it all in 24 hours. I don't know if that's going to happen. But he's using this time before he officially becomes the president to use his leverage.
But Ed, how much is this about Netanyahu as well, who just in the past week has been accused of genocide by Amnesty UK? He's got his corruption case going on at the moment in Israel. You know, a former historian, current professor in Israel has called it out as a genocide. The pressure is on him. Is he almost trying to claw some sort of his reputation back a little?
Well, I mean, I think I think Trump will have a huge influence on the peace process because he's resolutely pro Israel. But yes, I think Israel wants peace, and Netanyahu, I don't know, part of the doubts about Netanyahu has been the way he's prosecuted the war has been about his own political career, because he's in a corruption trial right this minute. But they've now got Syria collapsing around them. That's a new front that Israel has to deal with. They've got Lebanon and they've got Gaza. So, you know, even Israel, despite being well armed by the United States, will be finding this, you know, a difficult thing. So I think all sides, there is a moment for peace. And if you've got someone like Trump leaning in and saying, I want peace, and being very clear and unequivocal in a way that actually Biden, to a certain extent, was not, that can potentially be a very good thing.
OK.
Now, I'm slightly nervous to bring up food and lunch because I fear that the Christmas lunch debacle that's coloured our debate this morning will rear its ugly head again. But yesterday, Kemi Badenoch spoke about it on the programme yesterday as well. Speaking in The Spectator, caused a fuss by saying that lunch is for wimps and sandwiches aren't real food. So I want to ask your thoughts on that, first of all, because people are very cross about that. And also, we're having a debate later in the programme about Christmas dinner, because particularly Gen Z, of course, are not eating turkey with all the trimmings, not even perhaps having goose or other traditional fare. But we're talking... Look at Ed's face. Terrible. We're talking... would you have pizza in the House of Lords for your festive lunch? Because that's what people are choosing to. Is there anything wrong with that?
I'm quite pro the idea, actually. I quite like Gen Z shaking it up. I quite like the idea of making demands. On Christmas Day is the day you can make demands. You know, it's like the prisoner's last meal. You know, you say, this is the moment when you say, actually, this is my favourite food. It's Christmas Day. I'm going to have this for my Christmas lunch.
Well, I mean, look, if I had someone who wanted pizza, I'd say, you know, bring it along. But
you're going to have to... that way.
Well, no, they can have a seat at the table. You know, that's the welcoming of Christmas, isn't it? But there will be a Christmas lunch. I mean, the reason why you need a good roast dinner on Christmas Day is partly it's all the leftovers. And there's nothing I like better than a little bubble and squeak, or I have to say, and I even had it this week because we had a roast dinner on Sunday, a hot leftover roast dinner sandwich.
Exactly.
A sandwich? That's not a proper meal, Caroline.
No, because a roast dinner
even if
has
it's
to
got
last.
a roast dinner in the middle of it.
I'm sorry, it's, you know, in the middle of the dinner, yeah, exactly.
Can I say, if you came to a British Asian household over Christmas...
what do you have?
Whatever it will be, it'll have spices on it.
Yes.
So if it's turkey, it's spiced up. If it's chicken, it's spiced up. We have lamb in our house, I have to say. We stopped doing turkey a long time ago. My brother cooks this amazing leg of lamb, very spicy.
One of those
but with all the
roasts,
trimmings.
8-hour slow roast.
Oh, it's just
melts like butter.
On it. Oh, it's lovely.
But I bet you also...
We're all going round
Boxing Day and the day
Christmas
afterwards,
lunch.
you've got some lovely leftovers there as
well. You go
well.
to my aunt's house
Why haven't you asked me around
She makes
for
chicken
Christmas
biryani.
Why haven't you coming?
We have chicken biryani.
Can you believe he hasn't asked us round for Christmas lunch?
I know.
Oh, for God's sake, can we move on?
Fail.
By the way, can I just say, I think Kemi
We're all
Badenoch...
over to...
cracking stuff.
What?
I mean, it's great copy, isn't it?
What?
Yeah.
Fair play to her to start a whole debate about the sandwich.
Really?
And we're all talking about it.
We are
We're all
talking
About
about
straight-talking politicians, I like a politician who gets off the fence.
It's like the public would be asked, if Kemi was a sandwich, what would she be? If Keir was a sandwich... We're going to have that next. That's
if you're talking about cutlery...
On Monday, do join us for that live
What kind
debate.
of sandwich would you be?
Well, look, always
The new
a pleasure.
game show from ITV.
Always
I want the copyright on that, please.
By the way, do get in touch with what you like to eat on Christmas Day. Do you go for the traditional? Could you think of nothing else? Because we're talking about that later on in the show.